Like the majority of young adult males, I am a degenerate sports bettor, and not a very good one at that. And after Bijan Robinson didn't hit his over for carry attempts, losing the last of my $20, not knowing how I was going to pay for rent this month, or how I was going to feed my cats, I knew that enough was enough and I had to make a change. So instead of, quitting and not betting so I didn't risk losing any more money, I decided to double down, because I'll quit once I reach even. I swear this time I will. So after pawning off the extra deluxe Spice and Wolf manga I got, seriously, they sent me 2 by accident, I had enough money to create a 27-leg parlay that would just keep me out of bankruptcy. But then I thought, wait a minute, if I'm so bad at making picks, why don't I get someone else to do it? But because I don't talk to anyone else, I'm going to use my only other option, AI. Alright, so I'm definitely not the first person to try and use AI to place bets on who to pick for parlays. However, this idea isn't extremely popular, and the people I have watched who've made videos on it haven't done so in a very thorough way. Or at least I don't think so. So I want to try and run this experiment over a long period of time and release the data to you all afterwards. If you just want to see the results, skip ahead to the timestamp shown on the screen now. Now there's a few different ways I could go about doing this. Number 1, money lines. Moneyline betting, for those who don't know, is essentially just betting on who will win the outcome of a specific game or matchup. It doesn't matter the score or the statistics of the players, it only matters who wins in the end. The only problem with this is, to my betting monkey brain, it's no fun. That is, until you find the right market. Betting on primetime Sunday night football is lame. Betting the money line on Irish bog snorkeling, now that's where it's at. Number 2, point spread. Point spread betting is similar to money line, but it adds in quote-unquote phantom points. Let's say that Team A has a point spread of -5 and Team B has a point spread of +5. From this information, we can tell that Team A is expected to win this matchup. Now, if you bet on Team A, the only way you win your bet is if Team A wins the game by scoring more than 5 points than Team B. If they win by only 4 points and you bet on them, you lose. Conversely, if you bet on Team B, the underdog, you win your bet if Team B beats Team A, or if Team B loses by less than 5 points. If Team A wins by exactly 5 points, or Team B loses by exactly 5 points, it's a push and you get your money back. You're essentially just betting on if the underdog will get blown out, which could be fun, but I think there are better options. No pun intended. There's future bets, where you bet on if a team will win a championship, or if a player will win an award, among other things that could happen in the future, but that takes several months to know the results of, so that option is out too. The fourth and final option is the good old tried and true over-under, a prop bet. It's basically as easy as money line. You just bet if a certain player will go over or under the number given to you by the betting service. For example, if Johnny J. Johnson Jr. is a baseball player, his over-under might be 0.5 hits for his next game. The reason why it's half a hit and not 1 is because you can't have half a hit. So he will either go above his line or he'll go under. It won't hit exactly 0.5. Sometimes he may have an over-under of just 1 hit, where he will either go over or under the amount of hits. But if he only gets 1 hit, it's essentially a push, so you get your money back. But what's even more ingenious than this is not just placing a bet on one person for an over-under, but if you place as many as you want. Oh, Sam S. Strongman Sr. has an average of 3 touchdowns a game for the past 4 seasons, and his over and under is only half of 1. And John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt's over-under is if the people in town will shout. Well, this is an easy lock. Nothing could go wrong. But with parlays, the trick is that although your multiplier goes up the more people you put on your slip, there is more odds for an error happening if one person doesn't hit their line. You just lose it all. I just brought up so many memories of people watching this video having 5 of the 6 people on their line hit for prize picks. Don't worry, I've been there too. Here's the plan. I'm going to ask 4 different AI chatbots their opinions on certain over-under bets, and record what they pick. From there, we will get the results of if any AI is good at sports betting, and 2, which AI is the best. Now, there are a few issues that we have to take care of. Number 1, what to bet on. There's obviously a plethora of different games and sports you can bet on for parlays, but I want to try and stick to one event to gather as much data as possible, which will be the NBA. Since we are in the middle of the season, there's games that happen every night, and if this video does well and you want me to try with other sports, let me know in the comments down below. 2, how many legs should the parlay be? Minimum for any parlay needs to be 2 legs, and theoretically there is no maximum, but some sites do limit you on how many legs you can put on. In my case, for my first video on this topic, I'm going to limit my legs to just 2. Number 3, where will I place my bets? This one is kind of a tricky question. I'm obviously not sponsored by any gambling or betting sites, but it would make sense to try and find the best line possible since there will be discrepancies among sites. My usual go-to is Prize Picks, but there are other sites like Sleeper, Underdog, FanDuel, DraftKings, etc. However, some sites don't have the same line options as others. I think I'm going to stick with Prize Picks for this video and see how it plays out. Again, this is not a sponsor, this is just what is most convenient for me. And finally, number 4, the most important question, how much will I place for each bet? Now, listen, I'm not rich, far from it, but if I want to gather as much data as possible, I want to place a lot of bets. I could place $101 bets or $25 bets. It's just a matter of how long I want this to keep going on for. If I do 3 bets a night for a month for $1, that's $90 instead of $450. Granted, that does not take into account any money I could win back. So to start off, I'll be depositing $100 into my PrizePicks account and placing $5 bets, and we'll see where it goes from there. Please like and share this video, I'm desperate for the ad revenue. So my first night of betting was December 30th, 2024. Because it wasn't the new year yet, I didn't have to make any New Year's resolutions to not sports bet, so it felt fitting. To start, I looked at the popular section of PrizePicks to see what people were betting on. Now, betting sites are designed to get you to spend as much money on them as possible. That is obvious. The ones that they're showing as quote-unquote popular are the lines that they think people will think have the best chance of hitting. Also, the previous 5 games stat is almost always entirely useless. Ignore it. The best chance you have of winning a bet is to look at the player's health, their seasonal average, and especially their head-to-head matchup average against the team they're playing against that season. And even then, nothing is guaranteed. I did start off by taking the top 6 players who were in the popular section and asking AI which 2 I should take for a parlay. The lines were Bilal Coulibaly, over-under 23.5 points, rebounds, assists. Josh Giddey, over-under 14 rebounds and assists. Norman Powell, over-under 24 points. Jordan Poole, over-under 29 points, rebounds, and assists. Trey Murphy III, over-under 20.5 points. And Jalen Brunson, over 26 points. To start off, ChatGPT picked Josh Giddey for the over and Trey Murphy III for the over. So there I went and submitted my $5. Now, I knew I still wanted to play 2 more bets for that night, but I didn't want to just pick from the popular section. So I thought I'd ask ChatGPT if it had any other suggestions. And honestly, I didn't think I'd get a response, but I actually got a very interesting one. It gave 4 options. Evan Mobley, over 29.5 points, rebounds, assists. Karl Anthony Towns, over under 12.5 rebounds. Josh Hart, over 27.5 points, rebounds, and assists. And PJ Washington, over 20.5 points and rebounds. But then I looked at its source, and it cited 3 different sports books as its reference. So I couldn't really get a good, unbiased pick. But for the fun of it, I asked ChatGPT which of those 4 would it choose for a parlay if it had to pick. It chose Evan Mobley and Josh Hart. For this first one, I was just going to start off easy and use the PrizePicks popular section, and I asked the same prompt to Gemini, Copilot, and Meta. I tried using it with Claude, but it would just not give me a straight answer because it would be enabling gambling behavior or something. If you suggest using a different AI or want to know what the results would have been if I used the premium version of these chatbots, let me know also. So prior to these games happening, the results were all four choosing the over for Josh Giddey, and a split of 2 and 2 with ChatGPT and Gemini choosing the over on Trey Murphy, and Copilot and Meta taking the under. All four chose the over for Norman Powell. There's a 3-1 for the over for Jordan Poole, with Copilot being the only under. 3-1 on the under with Bilal Koulibaly, with ChatGPT being the only over. And finally, a 3-1 decision on the over for Jalen Brunson, with Copilot being the only under. In the end, I chose Josh Giddey and Norman Powell for my $5 bet, which got me a 3x multiplier. So I'd win 15 if it hit, with a $10 profit. Hi, this is Neil from the future here. So in doing research and work for this video, I ultimately decided that this was a very stupid way of going about how to choose player prop bets. And I kind of already knew it beforehand, but I knew I had to either find or create a different way of getting prop bets that aren't just from the top page of a betting app. There were a few different ways I could have gone about this, but ultimately I decided the best way was to use an API of pre-existing betting aggregate sites to find my bets. See, there's several ways you can place a bet. You can either go to a casino in real life and give physical cash to a cashier and tell them your bet, and they will give you a ticket, which you can redeem back with them if you win. This is obviously the one that takes the most work, and because sports betting is illegal in Minnesota, minus horse racing for some reason, I couldn't do this anyways if I wanted to. The second method is to go directly to a sports book. These are your DraftKings, FanDuel, Underdogs, PrizePicks, Sleeper, and tons more. These are the individual apps that host thousands of different types of bets every day across dozens of different sports. You deposit money into that app, and you can only place a bet on that app. Simple as that. But there is a third method of placing bets, and that is to go through an odds aggregate site like Betting Pros or OddsJam. These are essentially third-party websites that, for a fee, will tell you the lines of certain props across multiple different books. That way, you can find the most favorable line and place your bet on that site. And some of these sites will even let you sync all your accounts together, so you can do it all through one click of a button. Through these books, you can also do something called arbitrage betting, where essentially you just find the same line on two different sports books, but there is a discrepancy between the two. Say there's a tennis match between player A and player B, but book X has player A at plus 120, and book Y has player B at also plus 120. So if you bet the same amount of money on both players, you will profit no matter what. This obviously comes with the risk of getting banned, and in order to profit massively, you need to put down a lot of money at first. But this isn't what I'm trying to do for this video. The reason why I bring these sites up is because if I can utilize their APIs, I can get a bunch of different data from tons of different sports books, which I can then feed into the AI to help it choose the best one. This, I believe, is a much more practical and just overall better method of obtaining more accurate results compared to a single app. The only issue is that these aggregate betting sites that you and I know about don't give you free access to their API. And the sites that do give out access only do so for a lot of money. I'm talking like tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, which for me, making this video, is a tad pricey. Luckily, I was able to find one company that was able to give out their API for free, with limited calls, that being 10 per minute, which is still a ton more than I needed. I'm not sponsored, nor am I taking money from them, but Sport Game Odds is the one I used if you're curious. I had pretty limited experience in API usage prior to this, but after a while, I started getting the hang of it. Instead of using Visual Studio Code for all my calls, I used Postman. Again, not sponsored, but the app worked well for what I needed it to do. In the beginning, I was still fine-tuning how I wanted to filter the information and bets I was getting down. My goal was to get the prop bets for every player's points, rebounds, assists, points plus rebounds, points plus assists, points plus rebounds, points plus rebounds plus assists, steals, blocks, turnovers, 3 points made, and fantasy score for the lines I was willing to bet on. I wanted each of those lines for every player set to play that night in the NBA game. Given that there can only be 15 players on a standard roster, and there's usually 6 to 8 games a night with 2 teams, that's anywhere from 2,160 to 2,880 possible prop bets to bet on. It's quite a bit of data. When I started off, I again didn't exactly know how to filter this down, but at least I got it working. So for the New Year's Day games, I was able to get a list of 697 different bets to place across 11 different teams. Some teams had a lot of players to bet on, and some had very few. At the time, I wasn't sure why, but it was already a huge step up from where I was before. I would later learn that many sportbooks don't let you place lines on bench players that rarely play, which whittles down the possible prop bets by a lot. But still, I was happy with what I had. From there, it was just a matter of getting this formatted into an Excel spreadsheet, and we were set. The main data that we wanted to look at is the player, the prop, and the line. There is data on what the recommended take is, if we should do over or under, along with the payouts from different sports books, but we don't really care about these because we want the AI to do all the work and deduce it on its own. But in trying to implement all this, I ran into another problem. See, after getting the API to give me all the player picks, I wrote some JavaScript to export that data neatly into a .xlsx document. The issue arises when trying to get the AI to read that .xlsx document. As of the time of making this video, ChatGPT is the only major site that will allow you to upload and for it to analyze a .xlsx or other spreadsheet document, meaning that ChatGPT is the only one that can actually make the picks. This does take away a layer of the experiment where each AI picked its own 6 unique players, but at the same time, we are able to more accurately decipher the statistics of each AI when they all work on the same fixed set. So there is an advantage and disadvantage of doing it this way, and I still think it worked out alright. So here is the list of steps I followed to get the data. Number 1, call the API to get props from tonight's NBA games. Number 2, take the JSON data and feed it into the JavaScript to output into a .xlsx file. 3, input the .xlsx file into ChatGPT with a prompt to pick the 6 players. 4, take the 6 players with their lines and ask each AI whether they will go over or under with that same prompt. 5, record the AI's answers. 6, gather the actual numbers. 7, mark if the AI was correct or incorrect and repeat. And for the most part, once I figured out how to get the bets, it was pretty smooth sailing. The API I was using didn't get me bets on many bench players. It was usually only the starters and maybe a few subs. So my original estimate of over 2,000 different prop bets for each night was whittled down to an average of around 800 to 1,000, depending on the amount of games that day. The real challenge came from writing the prompt for ChatGPT to pick out the players from the spreadsheet. I must have had to go through at least 30 different prompts with edits and rewrites before I settled on something that worked most of the time, because it wasn't always perfect. Some errors included ChatGPT only picking the first 6 players based on alphabetical order, which meant that Aaron Gordon and Alperen Şengün were picked a lot. It also sometimes ordered the teams by alphabetical order and picked the first 6 in that order. Oftentimes, it would pick players who weren't on the list and weren't even playing that night. Sometimes the line they picked for the prop was different than was on the spreadsheet. It also oftentimes didn't exactly know what the date was or what tonight's games were, so the opponent for the player that it picked was incorrect. This was by far the most frustrating and time-consuming part of it all. It sometimes took me an hour just to get through the whole process and have picks for that night. But by the time I got to the end of January, I had a pretty good system in place, and most of the time now it takes me 5 minutes or less to get all the picks that I want. I'm planning on trying to incorporate all of this into one singular application where there's a lot less button clicks and a lot less manual work. So I want the API and maybe even the ChatGPT API to work simultaneously so I can get player picks and then just ask each chatbot after that. But that is going to be a project down the line. But if you're curious, here is the prompt that I settled on. Again, I might be changing and tweaking it a little bit here and there as I keep on doing this experiment, but for the most part, I'm pretty happy with the results that I get from this. Hi ChatGPT, I have a .xlsx document containing over X prop bets on players from tonight's game, and I list the date. The dataset includes columns for event ID, date, player names, the team the player is on, the opponents they're facing, the prop, which includes blocks, assists, steals, points, rebounds plus assists, points plus rebounds, blocks plus steals, turnovers, points plus rebounds plus assists, points plus assists, 3-pointers made, and fantasy score. The final column is for the line, i.e., if the player's performance that night will either go over or under that line. What my goal is from you is to analyze this data set and identify the 6 most likely player prop bets to hit in tonight's NBA game, focusing on either the over or the under for individual players. Also, consider the player's current seasonal statistics and their past performance against the specific opponent they're facing. Data from this can most likely be gathered from a source like www.basketballreference.com. Use relevant sources or data points such as recent performance metrics, expert opinions, or any other statistic models that you find relevant to come to your conclusion, and give an explanation as to why you picked a certain player for their over or under line. Your final output should give me 6 player prop bets and your prediction if it will go over or under the line. These players should be picked from what you think are the best odds for hitting their over or under for that line. You must only pick players that are listed in the .xlsx document that is uploaded. I must emphasize what you should not do. Do not just pick the first 6 players or teams you find on the list. Do not pick the first 6 players based on player names in alphabetical order or team name in alphabetical order. You can only pick from the players listed in the file. There can only be 1 prop bet pick per player. The goal of this is to find the 6 best odds from all of these players. Please make sure that you are scanning through the entire list before outputting your picks. You should output your picks in 2 formats. The first should be a table. Columns should be name, opposing team that they're playing in tonight's game, in the 3-letter abbreviation, the line number, the prop, the pick, over or under. The second should follow this format: player, team versus opposing team for tonight's game, the over-under, and the line. This is something that I wanted to try and keep consistent in order to avoid changing its picking method based on a few new words added or taken out. And I'm pretty happy with the results, as I mentioned before. But if anyone has any suggestions on how I could make it better, you can let me know in the comments down below. I asked it to output it into 2 different formats so it would be easy to copy and paste from the ChatGPT table to my Google Sheets table, and then also to copy and paste the lines into each AI. The prompt I used for that was much more simple. Pick the over-under of these NBA player prop bets for tonight's NBA games, and give your reasoning as to why you decided over or under. I ended up asking ChatGPT again, even though it had already picked the lines, to give every AI a neutral playing field for how it answered, just a blank canvas. And after a month, missing only 2 days due to a Wild game where they got blown out 0-4, and sitting outside Micro Center for this 50 series launch and not getting a 50-90, I finally had 174 prop bets to get stats from. And the results are pretty cool. As I mentioned before, this is just for experimentation purposes only. Do not try and copy my method expecting to win big. Generative AI is still a very new technology and can make mistakes, and is probably not yet suited for asking questions like these. If you throw down your mortgage on Devin Booker making over 23.5 points and lose it because AI told you to, buddy, you were stupid to begin with to bet that. I will link the full spreadsheet down in the description below in case you guys want to view it on your own. In all honesty, 174 bets is not a ton of information to go off of. I think I'm planning on increasing the player count to 10 a day just to garner more data and get more accurate results. But I still think a month is a pretty good check-in point where the percentages start to settle in. But it would be interesting to see all of this a year down the line. But here is the matrix from top to bottom of the results. If you're curious, there was not one day where all AIs got every pick correct. Nor was there one where they got every pick incorrect. The closest we got without a player that did not participate was on January 5th. The AI went 18 for 24. And on the 4th, it went 4 for 24. Coincidentally, the worst and best days were just back to back. If you're wondering if any of the AIs went 6 for 6 on the day, yes, that did happen once. Although we did have multiple 5 for 6s. January 5th, Gemini was the only one to ever go 6 for 6 on the day. It correctly predicted LeBron James to get over 7.5 assists, DeMar DeRozan to go under 23.5 points, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to go over 28.5 points, Walker Kessler to get over 10.5 rebounds, Dorian Finney-Smith to go over 3.5 rebounds, and finally Jason Tatum to go over 9.5 rebounds. I'd also like to point out that after about a week or so of doing this, I started putting less and less emphasis on the parlay aspect of this experiment, and more on just the overall correctness. I couldn't think of an easy way to filter down each AI's best parlay picks to what I should actually choose. So I ended up just going with picking whichever ones had the most in common. For example, if they all agreed on picking the over or under for at least 2 players, I'd always choose those before going to the 3/4 majority. And this almost always was the case. Hello, Neil from the future again here. One of my friends that was kind of peer reviewing this video suggested that I add a small section on what the spreadsheet is, what it means, how to use it, how to understand it, and I thought that was a good idea, so I'm going to put it in right here, right now. Should be fairly quick and easy. If you don't care, you can skip over the section and get to the stats. But when you click on the link in the description for the spreadsheet, this is going to be the main one you want to be looking at. It is all the prop bet picks here. The columns are pretty self-explanatory. It's the date that the game happened, who picked it, the AI that picked it. So far, it's only ChatGPT, but in the future, if I'm able to find a way to get another AI to do it, I figured I'd have a column there so it shows and we can calculate based on that. I have the player column. The opponent that they played for that game, the player did, the line that was that the player had, and then the prop. So, for example, Colin Sexton, he played against the New York Knicks. His line was half a block, and normally these 2 columns here are blank when I first put in the props, but once I fill them in with the actual stats, you'll notice it color codes the chart or the columns on the right here, showing if they were correct or incorrect. So Colin Sexton, he was under his line for blocks. So ChatGPT predicted over, got it incorrect, but Gemini and Copilot predicted it correct, so it got under, and Meta picked over as well. So the correct percentage overall was 50%. The line above for Alpiron was 0% because none of them got it right. Same below 50%, 75%, but they all got Cat. He got 21 rebounds. Wow, on a line of 12.5. So he crushed it, and yeah, they all got that one correct. You'll notice that there are some that are yellow right here. That just means that the player, so for example, James Harden did not participate. So his line is not applicable. I remove these kind of from the overall equation because the AI can't really account for if a player decides to not participate right before the game. So yeah, it shouldn't count if they got it correct or incorrect. But yeah, that's what this main table means here. There are a few other tabs down here, but I don't want to go into them because it'll give some spoilers for the rest of the video. But yeah, that's all I had. Okay, back to the video. Here are some more stats on the prop bet totals that ChatGPT picked. In total, there were 49 instances of over-under points, 35 instances of over-under assists, and 25 instances of over-under rebounds. These were by far the most popular choices for the AI, which makes sense because they're usually the most popular picks, and they happen the most often, so there's more data on them. The only other one that had double-digit picks was 3 points made, coming in at 10. The rest were picked 7 times or less. Originally, Copilot was doing much better than the rest of the crowd, hitting at over 70% after its first 2 weeks. This started to dwindle significantly until it settled back with the rest of the crowd. One AI in particular did much worse than the rest throughout the entire process, and the other 2 were pretty neck and neck all throughout it. But after 29 days and 174 picks later, 3 AIs came within 2% of each other for their pick correctness. Let's break it down. Coming in at last place at a sub 50% CPP, or correct pick percentage, is none other than Zuck's finest, or I guess in this case, worst creation yet. It's Meta AI, sitting at just under 45% at 44.94, with 71 correct picks and 93 incorrect picks. This one was by far the worst performing AI model when it came to guessing prop bets. I'm not entirely sure why. Meta AI was trained on the Llama model, which is proprietary to Meta. I actually liked the responses I got from Meta. I found it to be very fast and able to respond with good insight when asking it to give reasons as to why it gave the picks that it did, but unfortunately it just could not compete with the rest. In third place, sneaking in just above 55%, was Google's Gemini. 87 correct picks, 77 incorrect picks. Similar to Meta, Gemini is trained off its own proprietary model, Lambda, which performed very consistently throughout this experiment. It actually was in second place for most of the run, but slowly started to fall off by the end. But again, third to first place is all within 2 percentage points of each other, so it's a very close competition. In second place is Microsoft's Copilot. Not to be confused with GitHub Copilot. Copilot got a 55.7 correct prediction percentage. 88 correct, 76 incorrect. It just beat Gemini out by 1 more correct guess. Like I mentioned before at the beginning, this was outpacing the rest of the AIs by a mile. It was in the upper 70s for a pretty good chunk of time. Again, I'm not entirely sure why it dropped off so heavily. There wasn't anything drastic that I did to change the prompt, and all of the other AIs always got the same prompt, but that's why we use large data sizes to weed out the anomalies. And by process of elimination, you can guess that ChatGPT was the one that came in at first place with a 56.96 CPP. 90 correct guesses, 74 incorrect guesses. ChatGPT was doing pretty subpar to begin with the experiment, but really started hitting the green by the end. In the last 3 days, it only got 3 incorrect guesses. So, if you wanted to know which AI did the best after a month and 164 prop bets, the answer is ChatGPT. But keep in mind, Gemini and Copilot were within 2 correct picks of taking that top spot. But don't use Meta, they need to work on some stuff. Now, if you want to stay around for some real nitty-gritty stats, I have some extra information for us as well that is on the next sheet. Keep in mind, though, that this will be linked in the description down below. Getting the data for this took some crazy formulas that ChatGPT had to help me out with, because there was no way I was going to be able to find all of this data by myself. Let's look at the king himself. Of the 49 over-under points prop picks, ChatGPT was correct 55.1% of the time. 31 times it picked the over and was correct 45.16 on those over picks, and 18 times it picked the under and was correct 72.22% of the time. Now, you would think that ChatGPT would have done the best in point picks since it had the overall best CPP, and points was the most picked prop. But actually, Copilot did have a better points CPP, coming in at 57.15%, with 47.22% correct on the 36 over picks and 84.62% correct on the 13 under picks. The sample size for under picks was 5 more on ChatGPT, which skews it a bit in Copilot's favor, but in the end, the higher amount of correct over picks edged it out as the best points prop bet picker. For assists, however, ChatGPT did come out on top with a 62.5 CPP on 32 picks, scoring 53.8% on the 26 over picks and 100% on the 6 under picks. Again, the data is a bit skewed towards ChatGPT picking under about half as many times as all the other AIs, but hey, when it wanted to, it was correct every time. Rebounds, surprisingly enough, was won by Meta with a pretty large margin. It had a CPP of 66.67%. The next closest was Gemini at 58.33%. Of the 24 rebound picks, it picked over 15 times and was correct 60%, and chose under 9 times and was correct 77.78%. A pretty healthy, close to even split. 3 points made is one of my favorite statistics because it's the only other prop bet that was picked 10 times or more. Gemini came out on top with a whopping 90 CPP. It went 9 for 10 on its predictions. 6 times it took the over and was right 5 times, and 4 times it picked the under and was right 4 times. This was really cool to see. Copilot and Meta both had a 40 CPP, and the next closest was ChatGPT at 70 CPP. I won't go too much more in depth on the other stats or prop bet picks, seeing as that they were all picked 7 times or less, so they don't give an accurate representation of the CPP. I'll throw the charts up on screen right now so you can pause and look at them if you want, but again, they will be linked in the spreadsheet down below in the description. On all prop bet picks, ChatGPT only had lower than 50 CPP twice for blocks and rebounds plus assists, in which it had a 33.33 CPP and a 40 CPP respectively. Meta, the worst performing AI, only did 50% or better 3 times. On assists at 53.13 CPP, rebounds at 66.67 CPP, and steals at 71.43 CPP. In total, there were 18 over or under props that were picked 10 times or more. 11 of those had over a 50 CPP. The worst performing prediction with at least 10 picks was Meta AI on the over for points. It picked over 36 times and was only correct an abysmal 30.56% of the time. ChatGPT had by far the best under pick correctness at nearly 80% overall, 77.5 to be exact. It had 31 correct under picks out of the 40 total. Keep in mind that the vast majority of these under picks come from very few instances. If you did want to pick the best bet to place strictly off of this dataset to give you the best odds of winning, I would tell you to go with the under on points from Copilot. The closest one comparatively to it would be the under on points from ChatGPT. But if we were to take the ratio of correct versus incorrect between both of them, to adjust Copilot to the under picks to give the same sample size of 18, it would go from 11 out of 13 to 15 out of 18 and give a 83.33 CPP. But in the end, if you were able to place these prop bets individually, not as parlays where the outcome is determined by 2 or more hitting, you would have successfully made money if you used all of them besides Meta, that is. A 5 to 7% return is nothing to scoff at. However, that is basically doing worse than if you were to put the same amount of money in a 401k or a Roth IRA. But hey, I'm just a guy on the internet. It's your money. This was a very fun and very interesting experiment to perform. I actually had a ton of fun collecting the data, parsing it, and analyzing it, along with the metadata. My plan is to continue doing this throughout the year and give a 3, 6, and then 12-month update to see how things change. If you want to support me, I'm not asking for any money, just hit subscribe, like, and share it with a friend. I would much rather this video reach more people so they can learn about how well AI does with predictions and how the models compare with each other. And before you comment, which there might already be some already, yes, I do plan on adding DeepSeek in the future. So stay tuned with the 3-month update and you can see the results when it happens. But otherwise, thanks to everyone who stuck around to the end of this video. This was a fun project like I mentioned before, and I intend to improve and make it more efficient as time goes on, and share the results with you all. If you like this video, make sure to click like and hit the subscribe button if you want to see more content similar to this. Otherwise, that's it from me. Until then, I will see you all next time.